Hello, my beautiful friends, and welcome back to the Fertility Confidence Podcast. A couple of weeks ago, I released a reel over on our Instagram page at Fertility Confidence Method, and I want to actually circle back to it here in the podcast. And if you didn't see it, or you don't already follow FCM, go over and follow at Fertility Confidence Method. But what I did was I asked our followers to tell us one thing in the comments that they wish they knew before they started their fertility journey. And there was, oh my gosh, there was like over 50 comments in here. And I wanted to read some of them to you because I think there was a lot of really encouraging advice or just mantras and affirmations that we could probably pull into our own fertility space in here, and you can go through and read the comments if you wish. But there was also some comments that got me thinking about how we don't have appropriate conversations in women's health in general. So let me read off some of these to you, and then I'll let you know what I mean in a minute. So some of these are really beautiful. There's one that says, be patient, pace yourself, take care of yourself, nourish and love on your body, which I think is so important. Work on health long before you decide to get pregnant, earlier than you think you should, which is a really good nod to just like prenatal care in general. Manage stress levels, research and advocate. Getting pregnant is not as easy as sex ed made you think it would be. I think this one got the most love in the comment section for sure, which is something I so agree with. Like, how many of you in high school assumed you could get pregnant every day of your cycle? Like, that's what they teach us. It's this truly, I think, fear-mongering approach, quite honestly, but they don't truly teach us about our cycles in a time in our lives that we really need to know these things so that we can make good decisions. There's no shame in IVF. Start balancing your hormones and cycle tracking. Learn about my cycle and what each phase means, learn how to track my cycle, totally understand your body and feel empowered to advocate in a medical system that might not do that for you. Don't wait until you're ready before you start doing your research. And I also think this is a really, really great point, again, of my journey, my story. A big piece of our success was having a warning ahead of time. I had years of prenatal care behind me. Most women don't have that, right? We don't actually start having these conversations about nutrition and lifestyle and supplementation until you've already been trying for multiple months. And that is just wasted time. And I mean that in a polite way. I actually don't mean that in like a you're wasting your time sort of way, because it's not your fault, right? Like, it's not your fault that you aren't aware when you're, let's say, 26, that there might be things that you need to start considering and start thinking about. And one of those things being your current method of birth control. And we're going to circle back and talk about that in a second. Let's see. Let's read a couple more. Actually knowing what my body is doing during the menstrual cycle, and just generally about FAM, which is Fertility Awareness Method. They should teach this in school as a requirement. Agreed. I'm actually going to like that because I agree with that. Patience with the things you do not have control over. Patience with your partner because it's just as hard for them. I think that's a beautiful, beautiful sentiment. It's not as easy as you think to get pregnant, and it can happen any day of the month. And it can't happen any day of the month. Sorry. Yep. Start by learning about and tracking your cycle. Yay. Start eating for thyroid and hormone and fertile health and worry less about being thin. I love that one as well. Start balancing your hormones long before you're married and address any genetic mutations, not eating enough protein earlier on in my life. Absolutely. There's a whole conversation, and we had this conversation with Lily Nichols in a couple episodes ago. I think it was episode 107, where we talked a lot about protein and how important that is. Start cycle syncing the moment you start having your period. The coolest thing for me, and the fact that all of us now are in this realm, and hopefully some of you having daughters, is we now get to pass down that wisdom, right? Like, my daughter is going to be so well equipped for her hormones and for her period and how to help support her body through that process, and also just understand her body. Like, I remember being scared of my period. I remember really not talking about it. with my mom or anyone, truthfully. I remember the day I got it the first time. Thank God. I was at a friend's house. We were going to the Justin Timberlake and Christina Aguilera concert the next day. I was sleeping over at her house. We were going that night, and I was at her house hanging out for the day, and I got my period, and luckily I knew she already had hers. So I felt I still am quite shy and introverted, but I felt comfortable being like, oh my God, this is happening. And she was like, let me show you the way, right? It was like having this fairy godmother. Went to the concert, enjoyed myself. They dropped me off at home. The next day they were picking me, that same family was picking me back up to go spend a week at their cottage. And I remember telling my mom in the morning, like, Mom, I got my period yesterday. And I literally remember laying in bed. She was waking me up because I had to get up to go to this cottage. And she was like, oh, I kind of figured because you've been so grumpy. And like, that was the extent of the conversation. And no smack on my mom whatsoever. We just didn't talk about that stuff, right? And she like decked me out and all the things that you give your 13-year-old daughter or 12-year-old daughter, however old I was at that time, and sent me on my way for the cottage trip, which I think I lasted 2 days before I was like, come and pick me up. It's like probably not the best place to be experiencing that for the first time in a house full of people I did not know. So I just know that experience for my daughter will be so, so different, which is awesome. Get your hormones tested way earlier. Start trying before you think you're ready. No matter what happens, you deserve to be a mother. I think that's really great. Advocate for an endo diagnosis sooner. There's so many here. So what I found, there's tons and tons and tons of really great tips. And there's some people saying to freeze your eggs, which I do think like maybe this podcast isn't the most appropriate place to have that conversation, but I do have lots of thoughts about that process and how we need to be having that conversation earlier. But the whole reason I'm bringing this up is because there was also a few comments around not taking hormonal birth control and fearing hormonal birth control and wishing they'd never done that. And a few comments of women being like, why do you say that? Like, what do you mean? And I thought it was a really interesting show that there's this how the hormonal birth control, whether it's the pill or the patch or the IUD or what have you, how they're just such a polarizing topic. There's women who are very much like against and demonizing and villainizing and just way over here. And then some women that are like, what on earth are you talking about? I've been on hormonal birth control for 15 years. Like, what do you mean it's bad? And it just shows how little we actually talk about the risks and also the potential benefits. So I've been mulling this conversation over for a few days, actually, because a part of me was like, I do not want to have that conversation on the podcast. I do not want to open up that can of worms because it is a polarizing topic. And my personal stance is that there is a time and a place for hormonal birth control. And villainizing it is really, really detrimental to those women that truly need it as an option. The issue that I have with hormonal birth control is the overall lack of consent and information given to young women when they're offered it as an option. And that was definitely my journey. So it's funny, I recorded a podcast for Katie Stewart on her podcast, I don't actually know what her podcast is called. Clear Skin Chronicles. On Clear Skin Chronicles, I'm sure it'll come out soon. Definitely go and give it a listen. We chat all about the intricacies between fertility and acne. And Katie and I are very, very close. And we do a lot of the same stuff. So it's really fascinating, even though she treats acne and I treat fertility. Anywho, I was recording that this morning and I shared my story. And we talked a lot about my journey getting into this world and my journey with birth control and acne. And that's the only option that was truly given to me as a teenager when I was experiencing acne. And I went on multiple different types of pills and the patch and the NuvaRing and all the things. And every time I went to my doctor and was like, please, please fix my skin, I hate myself because I can't stand the way that I look. Like, please help me. There was only ever that one option. And there was never a conversation around risk beyond just asking me if I smoke cigarettes, because we know that women who smoke cigarettes have a higher risk of blood clots. That was only the ever like discussion of risk or consent that was given to me throughout the entire, like, I want to say 7 years that I attempted that route to clear my skin. And that's the problem, is when we're now circling back to, we have like almost multiple phases of our journey with women's health and hormones. That first phase is our intro to menstruation, right? We're young. We're likely between the ages of 12 and 16. Now, even probably like some girls are getting it even earlier, but likely us in and around that range. And we're like, what's happening to me? And now our mothers, our family, like, you are a woman. But we're not really learning about our hormones in that time frame, right? We're just like, you're going to bleed. You're going to bleed every month. This is how you take care of it. And that's kind of it. And you might be a little bit grumpy, but that's just because you're getting your period. It's called PMS. Everyone's going to blame everything on it for the next decade, right? Then we have this second set of women's health and in our teen years. And that's when we are feeling the ebbs and flows of our hormones, where we maybe are dealing with acne and we're navigating this whole world of trying to discover ourselves and also, like, quote unquote, battle our hormones, so to speak. We go through that for a long extended period of time. And some of us might not even really need to think about our hormones in our teen years and our 20s. You might just feel great. You might also be on birth control and not really feel the ebbs and highs of your hormones. And that's also very common, to be put on birth control when you're 12 and then not come off it till you're 30. So you don't even really know what hormones feel like at that point, because you've just been kept so suppressed this whole time. And then we enter the third phase, which is our fertility phase. And not everybody enters this phase because not everybody decides that they want to have kids. But for those of us that are hoping that's our future, we now enter this realm of wanting to get pregnant. What do we do when we want to get pregnant? If we're on birth control, we come off of it. If it's not working, then what happens? We start researching the shit out of it. And what comes up when we research? How to improve our egg quality, cutting this, that, and the other thing, a plethora of supplements, all the things, right? And now we're in this whole other world that we didn't even know existed. And that's what a lot of these women are saying in this post of like, start before you're ready, because there's this whole other world over here that nobody has been talking to you about. And that's cycle syncing and understanding your cycle and eating for your health and treating your body in a female-centric way instead of a male-centric way, and reducing your stress and mastering the foundations, all of these pieces that we end up teaching our clients inside Fertility Confidence Method, or introducing them to these concepts for the very first time, which is crazy when you look back at how long we've been alive. And we've always had hormones, and we've always need to manage our health in that way. So you want to start tracking your BBT, but all of the rules feel maybe just a little bit difficult. Or maybe you've actually already tried your oral BBT tracking and you are constantly forgetting to take your temperature. Your charts are super hard to interpret because your temps are all over the place, and you're feeling like maybe this is actually adding stress into your journey. I felt the exact same way when I started using BBT tracking for my own fertility journey, and I actually remember when my partner and I went backwoods camping and he could not stop laughing because I still packed my little pink thermometer in my backpack, but I was super dedicated, so dedicated that it actually started to impact my sleep. So when I heard about Temp Drop, I was instantly curious, and after over 2 years of using the device personally, I will never pick up an oral BBT thermometer again. Tempdrop is a wearable arm device that continuously tracks your temperature during your sleep and provides you with the most accurate basal body temperature through its advanced sensors and sophisticated algorithms. No more waking up at the same time every morning, no more worrying about waking up in the night, no more forgotten temps messing with your chart. Tempdrop literally eliminates all of the complicated rules of oral BBT temping and lets you have an accurate fertility tracker without all the added stress. Tempdrop can be used if you're a restless sleeper, a night shift worker, have long or irregular cycles, or maybe you're up nursing or up with your kids and still actually have the peace of mind that the data is being collected. I am obsessed with my Tempdrop and how easy it is to chart my cycle now. So I am super thrilled to offer you guys, my podcast community, a 12% discount on your Tempdrop device using the code KelseyTD, and you can combine this with any current promotion that the company is having. And then you have this last phase, which is menopause, right? So we're not there yet. We're all in that fertility phase. And we see a lot of women inside FCM coming in that early phase of their fertility journey in even the 3-4 month mark, and they've just come off the pill and they're like, my cycles are wacky. They're irregular. They're long. I have no idea what's going on. Am I even ovulating? I have all these symptoms. What am I going to do? This is not what I expected, because we have this narrative that, oh, the pill, it's innocuous. Don't worry about it. You're going to go on it. You're going to feel great. If you want to have a baby, you come off of it and everything is hunky-dory. And that's actually not the reality. So though I don't want to lean into this fear of OCP being bad, and that's what sparked this conversation, is I felt like there was people in the comments that were like, don't do this. And that's like the very one-sided piece of the conversation. And the reality is, like I said at the beginning, is there are going to be some women that this is the best option for them. Women with debilitating endometriosis may need the OCP to help manage pain while they wait for an appropriate diagnosis or removal or what have you. There's going to be women where it is their only option that's appropriate and keeps them feeling comfortable and safe in terms of family planning when they don't want a baby. And that's not something to be ashamed of. And we have this option. It is there for us. You just need to have the right tools and the right conversations to make an appropriate conversation. But I don't want to go back and talk about how to decide if you should go on it or not. Let's talk about, what does it mean? How does it actually impact fertility? What are the conversations we should be having, and how do we manage that? So the biggest, I think I pulled about 4 things from the literature that we need to consider when we've been on the birth control pill, and consider why maybe coming off of the pill hasn't been as easy for you, or you haven't gotten pregnant really quick like your doctor said you were going to. And one of those things is that the the hormonal birth control, any form, hormonal birth control of any form, it actually impacts your body's ability to absorb and use nutrients, specifically your B vitamins, which are important. They're all important, so I'm not going to say that after everyone, but your B vitamins, your vitamin E, CoQ10, which is everyone's favorite egg quality support, beta carotene, it impacts minerals like zinc and selenium and magnesium. All of these things are important. Your magnesium is important for hormones. Your CoQ10 is important for egg quality. It's a great antioxidant. Your vitamin E is an important antioxidant. Your B vitamins are important. And they actually found in one study, women who were on birth control compared to women who were not had significantly lower folate levels. And if you have done any ounce of reading around pregnancy and healthy pregnancy, we know that folate is incredibly important to lower the risk of neural tube defects. This is one of the reasons why we potentially want to consider actually giving you some of these nutrients before you even come off the pill. Let's start building stores up nice and early. It's also what makes a prenatal vitamin in those early days really important, to just build back those stores. And then we're going to hopefully have diet, nutrition really take over as being the brunt of that piece. The other portion that I thought was really intriguing about hormonal birth control was the potential impact on thyroid. And I know in our practice in Fertility Confidence Method, we see a lot of suboptimal thyroid levels. So what I mean by that is that their TSH isn't necessarily out of range, isn't hypothyroid diagnosable, but is in that middle range that is considered too high for fertility and pregnancy, which is what we call suboptimal thyroid. So they actually took a group of women, or multiple groups of women, they looked at back data, and they found that women who had been on birth control had higher risks of developing hypothyroidism. So they saw more hypothyroidism in the women who took birth control compared to the women who did not. And they noticed that it was a significantly higher trend if the longer you'd been on the pill. So the longer you were on the pill, the higher the likelihood of hypo, which we already know 1 in 10 women have thyroid issues. We already know that thyroid is a really big factor for the female population in general. And so they saw that women more than 10 who were on the pill for more than 10 years, which in theory could be from age 13 to 23, like lots of women are on the pill for more than 10 years, had a higher likelihood of hypothyroidism. And even if they're not developing overt hypothyroidism, even if it's just impacting them enough that their TSH is at suboptimal levels, that is then going to snowball into being a potential risk factor or root cause of fertility struggles down the road. So something to consider. The other piece that I thought was fascinating was that they noticed in women who were on birth control and women who had recently come off had lower antral follicle counts and smaller ovaries, so lower ovarian volume. Antral follicle count is something that we use to look at ovarian reserve. How many little follicles do you have in your ovaries? We ideally want this number to be between 10 and 20. So anything less than that, we're dealing with diminished ovarian reserve, which they don't have very great diagnostic criteria on. And I believe the AFC for DOR is below 7. So there's a bit of a gray window between 7 and 10. So anything below 7 being DOR, but potentially being on the pill, reducing ovarian volume. Now, before you panic, because I know everyone is like, oh my God, not my egg quantity. That's, all that matters to me in this moment. The best thing that we saw out of the study, and I pulled this actually out of Lily Nichols' new book, Real Food for Fertility, is that these results weren't permanent, that they did see ovarian volume and AFC return to what we could assume is baseline, though none of these women actually had a pre-birth control baseline. So it just takes time. And I think that is the conversation that's severely lacking in the medical system of how much time do we need to give our bodies to regulate after birth control. And so a lot of women go on birth control to help with a wide variety of concerns or just to hopefully not get pregnant. And then we're potentially masking some of that fertility red flags. If you had severe pain, if you had irregular cycles and you were put on birth control, the chances of those two things coming back when you come off are high. And now we have to deal with them. So if we're talking timeline and you're coming off the pill and you want to get pregnant right that month, we're likely not going to be able to achieve that result for most people. And when they actually looked at a study of nearly 3,000 women, they found women who used the oral birth control pill, the hormonal pill, had an average time of pregnancy being 8 months. And what I see in practice is it can take 4 to 6 months for your cycle to regulate after coming off the pill. I don't even run hormone testing till you're at the 3-4 month mark anyways. And I've had women take up to a year to really have their bodies be like, oh, I got this. I can do this, to figure out how to even deal with the fluctuations that are going on. And unfortunately, yes, there are things we can do to help support the body, support your liver detox processes, make sure you're pooping and your gut health is good, make sure that we're replenishing those nutrients that your body has probably been losing out on while you were on the pill, making sure we're supporting egg quality and doing all those things to get your body ready while we're trying and doing these things, but knowing that it might take a bit of time That's the conversation that needs to be had. So not necessarily about how this is the worst thing for you and you should never do it because you can't go back in time, right? That's not helpful. You can't go back to when you were a young teenager and change your mind. But how do I support my body moving forward? Making sure we're looking at our nutrients, we're getting good whole foods, we're eating a good diet that's going to replenish those nutrients. Have you had your testing done? Have you looked at your thyroid? And if you're curious about what are those optimal levels, what does that testing look like for fertility, I highly encourage you to check out our new little lab course called Fertility Labs 101. It's $17 and it is amazing. It is going to walk you through all of the labs you need to do and what the actual optimal levels are for both female and male, as well as some other, we call them advanced maneuvers. So some other deeper dive testing. If you just head over to ttc.kelseyduncan.com/fertility labs, you can grab your hands on that and I'll make sure that's in the show notes. But the looking at your thyroid, looking at your nutrient levels, looking at your hormones, checking your AFC, like all of these are things that you can be proactive in managing and looking at while you're starting out and when you're coming off the pill, so that we at least have an understanding of where do we go from here? How do we drive the ship forward? How do we support our body? So if you saw those comments when you were reading through and you're like, oh shit, I was on birth control for like 20 years. I must be a mess. Know that there are things we can do to help support your body and that you are making the best decision you can make with the information that you had at the time. And that's all we can do. We can't go back in time. We can just make different decisions moving forward and how to support our body. And sometimes there isn't a choice to use hormonal birth control. Sometimes we have to, and that's okay. So hopefully this was helpful, and I will see you guys next week in the next episode.